Welcome, everyone. Hi to the Young Professionals Learning Community. We are going to be talking about harm reductions, tools, and strategies for operational. My name is Joshua Calarino. I go by he, him pronouns, and I work at Youth Move National as a youth program specialist. I'm calling out of Miami, Florida specifically, and I have lots of experience within the mental health and substance misuse systems. I specifically have worked as a peer specialist, and that has been in multiple different roles as a lead peer, as a peer evaluator. I've worked as a training coordinator. I have a lot of experience within this realm. And a number of years ago, I received a voice award, a SAMHSA voice award for young adult youth leadership, which was a great honor. With that, I'm going to toss the mic over for just a second here to TJ to introduce themselves.
Hello, everybody. My name is TJ McGrath. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm here in Los Angeles, California, the opposite side of Joshua in the country. I'm one of the newest members to the Youth Move National Leadership Team. I've just made 6 months, but prior to that, I was working for our local health department, starting a transition age youth homeless shelter program with a 4-year grant. So I have experience in youth engagement strategies, harm reduction strategies, low barrier, all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to join this conversation today. And it's very exciting to see people from also California in here, Tennessee, Nevada. It's really cool to see everyone coming in this space from all over the country. So thanks for having me.
We're going to define harm reduction, and harm reduction can be defined as a set of policies and programs that allow individuals to mitigate the risks associated with particular behaviors. It respects both human rights and personal autonomy, non-judgmental care, and education. The approach seeks to improve quality of life for affected individuals and communities and recognizes that strategies that emphasize abstinence or behavior avoidance might work for some, but they are ineffective at the population. So that puts us all on the same page. And there's just some key things that I want to point out, right? Mitigate risks associated with particular behaviors, non-judgmental care, improve quality of life. And then again, it's the idea that emphasizing abstinence might work, can be effective, is great to do, but at the population level, when you put it to scale, it becomes less and less effective as we're going through that. So the harm reduction approach is the approach that we want to try to use to reach that population level. So now that we have this understanding of what harm reduction is, we're going to have a thought question, and we would like to hear your feedback in the chat box. So you had some fun facts. Let's see if we can get some answers to this question. So with the definition of harm reduction in mind, what are some harm reduction strategies that we see in our day-to-day? And what does this look like in our own communities, in our own daily lives? What harm reduction practices do we see on the regular? So we have some harm reduction interventions, right? So there's risk reduction, tools and services to reduce potential harm, needle exchanges, like we mentioned in the chat box, safe and supervised consumption sites, motivational interviewing, stages of change. Right, then we have that next one on screen there, right? That harm reduction, the approach and fundamentals to reduce potential harm. And then we have harm reduction again. So we have like little h and big H and little r and big R for these. Harm reduction now being a philosophical and political movement focused on shifting power and resources to people most vulnerable to structural violence. Right? So we have little h, little r harm reduction, big H, big R harm reduction. So one of them is an approach and the other one is an entire philosophy. And then of course there's risk reduction. And we can use each one of these things in our work on the day-to-day. So harm reduction as we know it, we've already got a really good list so far, but like I mentioned, right, sunscreen, condoms, seatbelts, bicycle helmets. One that we did not mention, designated drivers, an important one, right? People are going to go out and drink socially, right? And it's very important that we have a designated driver. Now, we could just say, don't ever drink ever, but that's not the harm reduction approach about the abstinence. We understand that there are risks. So the way that we can work around that is to have a designated driver. Medication-assisted treatment, needle exchange, Narcan, safe consumption, right? And lastly, housing first models. And this is just a handful. There are hundreds, maybe even thousands of more examples that we could come up with in this call. But again, these are the way that it look in the day-to-day. So we have one more thought question here. With the definitions that we have in place and with the examples that we know, think about this. What are the benefits and maybe even the barriers of a harm reduction approach?
Thanks, Joshua. Let's continue the conversation and transition a little bit into why are harm reduction practices effective and successful? What makes them work? Well, first off, these spaces allow individuals a safe and non-judgment zone to be open about who they are, where they are in life and in their journey, and can also help them avoid feeling isolated. I like to say harm reduction is a branch of lived experience. So having these individuals feel empowered and heard is very vital to this field of work that we are all a part of. Studies and research have also shown that harm reduction is evidence-based and has been proven to lead to decreases in health and social harms. So we like to say yay for science and data. And lastly, for those people who are re-engaging risk at any stage they are in, there are a handful of resources and specialists and peers like all of you on this call that can meet these folk where they are safely and professionally. Let's look at the key principles or tenets of harm reduction. These harm reduction principles can be a universal precaution applied to all individuals regardless of their disclosure of negative health behaviors. Given that health behaviors are not binary or linear, but operate along a continuum or spectrum based on a variety of individual and social determinants. It says pragmatism reflects the idea that none of us will ever achieve perfect health behaviors and that perfect, quote unquote, health behaviors are impossible to define. Humanism, the harm reduction approach that describes the way that providers value, care for, respect, and dignify clients as individuals. It's that basic human-to-human connection that we like to strive for as peer providers. Individualism, the idea that every person presents with their own needs and strengths, as well as with a spectrum of health behaviors and receptivity for intervention. Basically, no two people are alike. Autonomy, here patients are ultimately given their own choices about their medications, the kind of treatment they want, their health behaviors to the best of their abilities, beliefs, resources, and priorities. We want to give them reins of their journey. Incrementalism. By allowing patients to succeed in small ways and reinforcing progress towards their own goals, they remain engaged in care and have access to trusted providers in times of crises. We're going to move down to accountability without termination. This one's important. Patients are seen as being responsible for their own health choices and outcomes, but are never fired or terminated or dismissed, whatever words you guys use in your organizations, from care. Lastly, we have sociocultural factors. I like to say these can range from mix of intersectionalities that Joshua was talking about earlier. These can definitely pull from childhood adversities and definitely social inequities, public inequities, racial inequities. Are there any aspects of harm reduction that make you uncomfortable? Okay, maybe our next slide might help with some strategies for harm reduction moving forward. So Josh, let's move to the 3 E's.
Okay.
So I don't know about y'all, but I love a little alliteration. So when I'm taking in new information, this might help you. It says here, engagement. This can be all about meeting the client or participant where they are, like we said earlier, by fostering clear communication, building that trust and rapport, and reducing the stigma. Think about the utilization of peer engagement or peer support. For education, this is collaborative information sharing that is fact-based or evidence-based, like we shared earlier. So by doing this, we can collaboratively agree and engage community members and evaluators. Well, let me say that again. Collaboratively engage community members and evaluators / researchers equally. We like to say that saying nothing about us without us when it comes to decision making. So now we're going to move on to another 3-set kind of thing they can all take away. Here we go. Understanding risk, set, and setting. So something to think about. Nothing and no one exists in a vacuum. So understanding risk, set, and setting can give clinicians, harm reductionists, outreach workers, basically everyone on this call, more tools to support risk and harm reduction strategies for participants. So I like to think of these, I'm a very visual person, I like to think of these points on a triangle and how they all can interrelate with one another. So risk being here, setting. So think of risk as being the actual substance use or self-harm activity. The set is referring to the mindset. So this can include any of the person's thoughts, moods, feelings at the moment, and then setting the actual physical or social environment where the individual is currently at. All right, so you have that triangle. So now we're going to move into different guiding questions for you all that you can use in your work pertaining to each of these points. We're going to start with risk. So think about what issue is being presented at hand currently at the moment. What other possible sources of harm might be connected to the main issue? Are there ongoing or overlapping issues and challenges? What drug is being used at the moment or substance? And what is the risk of overdose? Is this critical? Is this an emergency? Do we need to call in paramedics? Or do we need to administer naloxone? Okay, those would be risks. Let's see what we can consider during set. How's the person feeling? Confident, angry, anxious? Definitely there's going to be confused. The whole emotional wheel there. Are they physically in pain or hurt? Is it emotional or physical? And then do they need to get well first? I don't know about some of you, but when I worked at a homeless shelter, sometimes they're in this state of crisis or psychosis that someone mentioned earlier, and we need to let them kind of just go through that phase first before we can safely administer any professional help. Can they engage with you fully? Are their basic needs met? Have they had water? Have they even eaten that day first before actually engaging with a conversation? And then setting, you guys can consider the following. What is the physical environment where the potential harm is occurring? Do you find them in an encampment? At home? Are they at work? Are they in your shelter? On the street? And then who's also around them? Are they doing this activity with someone else? Are they forced to do it? How does the person present to others? And then how will they react? Are there police around? Are there bystanders? Stuff like that. All right. So now that you have basically a triangle, we're going to move to a circle diagram. This is called the trans-theoretical model of change, or for short, we can call it the stages of change model. This model focuses on the decision-making of the individual and is a model of intentional change. So just remember that it's intentional. The model operates on the assumption that people do not change behaviors quickly. Hello, we're all human, and decisively. Rather, change in habitual behavior, this occurs continuously through a cyclical process with the following steps. All right, so they say pre-contemplation. In this stage, people do not intend to take action in the foreseeable future. So we're going to define foreseeable future within 6 months in this conversation. So people are often unaware that their behavior is problematic or produces negative consequences. People in this stage often underestimate the pros of changing behavior compared to the cons. In the contemplation stage, there you go, people are intending to start the healthy behavior in the foreseeable future, 6 months. People recognize that their behavior may be problematic, and a more thoughtful and practical consideration of the pros and cons of changing the behavior takes place. We're going to move into preparation, also known as the determination stage. Here, people are ready to take action within the next 30 days. People start to take small steps toward the behavior change, and they believe changing their behavior can lead to a healthier life. This always reminds me of those SMART goal sheets that a lot of case managers work with when you're planning out your goals and your settings for the next 30 days. So that's where I kind of see this. Action. In this stage, people have recently changed their behavior, yay, and intend to move forward with that behavior change. People may exhibit this by modifying their problem behaviors or acquiring new healthy behaviors. That's them actually doing the work. We're going to move into maintenance. In this stage, people have sustained their behavior change for a while. What is a while? Let's say 3 to 6 months, and intend to maintain the behavior change going forward. People in this stage work to prevent relapse to earlier stages. And lastly, according to this model, termination. Here, people have no desire to return to their unhealthy behaviors and are sure that they will not relapse. Since this is rarely reached and people tend to stay in the maintenance stage, this stage is often not considered in health promotion programs. Well, also, I don't think that the term termination helps being called that either. That's just me personally.
First off, just as a whole, forcing anything is always a dangerous way to go. But have you ever just sat down and tried to force anything to happen? I think even simply, have you watched someone try to like feed a baby that did not feel like being fed at the time, or had a baby that it just doesn't happen. That like they don't want to be fed. It's not going to work out. You need to wait for the time where this person is ready to go ahead and do that, right? Like this child needs to be prepared, and then we'll finally stop spitting out the food. We'll stop crying, stop yelling, all of that. These stages, I think, are a prime example of that. You cannot just force people to no more. You're done, right? It doesn't work. But with harm reduction, what it allows is like we mentioned, it takes time to do this. What this allows is for more time, more education, more knowledge, more time to get through these stages to finally get to that action and maintenance and hopefully avoid the relapse stage. And I think that's the key part of harm reduction that communities maybe don't know. You could sit down with them with this graph and see, like, you see this? Have you ever had anyone try to force you to do anything, right? It never works. Force is never a good way. But if we sit down with our clients, our peers, whatever language you use, and we can work with them, instead of just saying, don't do this, it's how can we do this less? What is affecting you right now that is bringing you to do this thing? I think a prime example that is very easy for communities to understand, and maybe you could bring this up, whoever might be having trouble with this, is the idea of just smoking cigarettes. For my entire life, ever since the earliest commercial that I can remember is a commercial that is anti-smoking, trying to stop me from doing that. Everyone knows that smoking causes cancer, damages breathing, is harmful, secondhand smoke. It is, even babies know that. It is, everyone knows it. But people don't just stop smoking. They don't, right? And people don't, you can't just force them to stop smoking either. It's because they just go out and buy another pack of cigarettes. It doesn't work, even with all of these things, to just say never smoke again. Regardless of how much they want to stop, they're just not at the place or time to do it just yet. But with harm reduction, we can work with them on, all right, what might be bringing you to smoke right now? What is making this behavior occur? Can we reduce your 2 packs a day to a pack and a half? Can we reduce your 2 packs a day to 1 pack? Can we reduce your 1 pack a day to 6 cigarettes? How can we reduce the harm that's happening right now to allow for time for these stages to occur, for you to finally have the resilience, the strength, the education, all of these things to take that action step? That education piece is really important. A lot of people don't think that EMTs and paramedics, they carry Narcan in the trucks and they can provide it to those who might be feeling and have an overdose, right? And that reduces strain. Things like needle exchange programs like that. Sure, right? You can have that idea of like, oh yes, it's giving them more weight, but what it's doing is, reducing the spread of disease and infection throughout the entire community, potentially even to those who are not using drugs, reducing the strain on the physical care service systems, right? All of these things compound with one another, but no one really thinks about that. But with this knowledge in mind, this last slide that we have actually addresses some of the things that we've brought up. So these are actually true and falses that we've gotten from places like harmreduction.org.
Harm reduction encourages or enables risky behaviors. It's false. The fact is, harm reduction accepts that some people engage in risky behaviors. There is no judgment for such behaviors, but this does not mean that risky decisions are encouraged. Good job, group. Next one. True or false? Abstinence-based models are the only way people get well. False. Fact, not every person can stop using or wants to stop using substances. Harm reduction accepts this reality and provides practical and immediate solutions that can be used rather than waiting for the individual to stop using substances at some unidentifiable future point. Next one, harm reduction is only for people who use drugs. False. Fact, harm reduction applies to many more behaviors than just drug use. We've said what? Harm reduction is cost effective. True, many people argue against harm reduction because they see it as spending a lot to provide services and equipment that is often seen as enabling. Research has proven over and over about the effectiveness of harm reduction programs, and this effectiveness includes reducing long-term costs associated with healthcare. So those of you who said true, good job. Harm reduction services make neighborhoods less safe. Okay, everyone's saying false on this one. Yes, harm reduction services do not increase crime in surrounding areas. In fact, they often improve community safety and cleanliness. Last but not least, harm reduction is unnecessary if we remove drugs and dealers from the equation. False. Supply side attempts to stop illegal drug use have not been successful, and prohibitionist policies have their own harmful effects on communities and individuals.
Just wanted to jump in real quick just for that last one. Is the idea is, again, people say like harm reduction, things like that, like why not just force them? We had that whole discussion. Prime example of why not do that is there was a whole long time in American history where we had a thing called the Prohibition, which was a colossal failure in every regard. So that's a prime example as to why things like force and all of these things, they don't work out, because like we talked about, right, when you put this into population, it just doesn't work. They don't work. Every arrow points in the direction of not working. We actually got much of our information from the resources that you will see on screen, and of course, some of our own personal experience working within community. With that, we have webinar recordings. So if you maybe miss one of these webinars, you maybe want to see what else we have, you could feel free to go. We have our contact info if you have anything else. Thanks so much, everyone.